So we're going to talk about web application security testing from a testing perspective. As many of you guys may already know, the company I work for provides web application testing products and services. So the focused approach comes from a testing perspective. And one of the reasons I actually took this perspective is because I've seen so many people do this so poorly. And recently, as joining a software organization like this, I've actually had a sort of epiphany looking at security testing from a slightly altered perspective outside just the security purview, and I'll explain as we go. And hopefully you won't disagree with me too much, and if you do, great, we'll have some hallway discussions. And if you don't, then just smile and nod. Okay, so each year I do a theme, and I think this year I'm probably going to stick with this again for next year. But we're going to do Alice in Wonderland. So if you don't like Alice in Wonderland, tough cookies. So there's a lot of love and hate when it comes to automation for web application security testing. It's a very polarizing issue. If you take a straw poll in any of these conferences among testers, you'll either get the crowd that depends heavily on automation for its survival and its testing practices, or they just want to do everything manually and totally hate on scanners and can't see the value. And there's very little middle of the road type of discussion. And this sort of bothered me because in reality, if you've spent enough time doing this and actually understand the problems that we face, you come to realize that without automation, the complexity that we face in this industry is insurmountable just by ourselves and the capacity of our brains and the ability to whiteboard and draw. So, some of us love web apps automation for testing because there's a speed of defect identification. And quite frankly, if I use the word scanning, it's not because it's a tool, it's just a concept, right? Scanning is fast and it quickly produces results. We're not going to speak to the quality of the results, but it can produce quick results, right? Whether they're great, they're okay, they're poor, that varies by what tool you're using, how much work you've put into it, but it has quick results. Now, on the hate side, and this is the two comments I hear probably the most, and the things I get the most is there's confusion around automation's purpose. And again, this is sort of the reason I see behind the polarization behind this issue is a lot of the camp that loves scanners and automation feels like that's what they depend on because they don't know enough to do this themselves. So they go and pick up either services or software to go do the testing for them and then depends solely and wholly on the results that the automation generates for them. So that's an interesting concept. On the other side of that is, the folks that think that you can't depend on automation because it's not going to find enough, or it finds too much garbage, or it's not producing the right results, etc. The other thing that I've picked up on, coming from a slightly different angle, and this is a software quality angle that I've spent the last year in, is the attack surface coverage is absolutely unclear in the area of automation and even in manual application testing. Now, this is something that it's an ongoing field of research for myself and my team, so there's more coming on this, which is why there's that little more on this problem shortly. But let's understand automation and give me a platform from which to speak so you guys all know where I'm coming from. I think the basic battle lines and the classic arguments come from humans offering intelligence, right? Humans offer intelligence, computers aren't going to be able to, okay? At the end of the day, when you buy a piece of automation, buy a tool, what it's going to do for you is what somebody's programmed it to do. Full stop. Automation will offer you limited scope. Right? It's going to, like I said, it's going to offer you the ability to test and do what somebody has already programmed it to do. So the idea that automation is going to find things that are previously undiscovered While it seems like a nice idea, I haven't seen that work in practice. The benefits of automation, of course, come from scalability and complexity. On the scalability side, you've got analysis of speed, coverage, and processing, right? Automation can scale to complexity levels and scalability levels, processing levels that you just can't. You can't, scale people the way you can scale processing power. And complexity, so applications are increasingly process-driven. And if you look at the way applications used to behave, so back in 95, 96 when we first started building web apps used to be very simple, right? HTML, you could write a web app or a website in Notepad. Can you do that today? Probably not. More importantly, whereas one person can write a website before, now it takes a small army, or in some cases a small country, to write a poorly functioning web application. And as you go through iterations, the complexity changes. People comment out other people's code, write in their own patches for things that they don't understand, write in code that they think does something that it doesn't actually do. And before you know it, the complexity behind most applications is so wild that simply drawing a map of a source-to-sink model is what you saw in Chengxi's talk this morning on that wonderful, piece of art, where if we try to map these, control flow graphs, all we get is just more scribbles than we can possibly understand using our brains. So what? And not to make a pun out of this, because somebody pointed this out, and I didn't do it on purpose. We've reached a tipping point. Haha. So I often get this, because we work with scanners and automation, I often get this question asked to me: why did your scanner or Scanner X or open source scanner, whatever tool, miss this particular vulnerability or miss this thing that I tested for? And there's always two reasons, right? And increasingly these two reasons are becoming more and more prevalent. The first reason is specific sequence or flow, and the second reason is data. Applications used to be link-driven. Today they are process and data-driven. Does everybody understand that? Is that pretty clear? It used to be you could follow a series of links, or you could just spider a site and understand the entire map of the application. That is absolutely impossible in today's application space. You just can't do it, right? You need data to drive through applications. So if you have the data, if you understand the flow of the application, you run out of excuses why you can't go all the way through the app and find defects. Then it becomes down to, well, then your technology is simply not sufficient. So the result of data and logic and the mirroring of those two concepts is a smarter form of automation, and we're hoping to get rid of the crawl and hope that we find stuff, right? Simply pointing a crawler at a website and saying, go, give me all my vulnerabilities so I can write a PDF, generate a PDF and send it to my developers to go fix. That concept is something that absolutely has to go away because it's not making anybody any safer. And every time I say that, I think one of my salespeople has a heart attack somewhere. So see that big red stop right there? Stop, point, and scan web application security testing. This doesn't actually make anybody any safer. In fact, I would argue that it's actually making this industry worse. Just randomly point and shoot. Because what ends up happening is we end up creating a false sense of security. And I think Arsenic was talking about this on a threat post yesterday or 2 days ago, where we do something, right? We run a test. We think we've got some results. We fix those results. It turns out that we still get hacked because we've missed something obvious, because we didn't know better, or we missed some piece of the functionality. Then it comes down to, well, your technology stinks, or your process stinks. Well, security is really not buying us anything. What are you actually doing here, right? Remember that Office space? What do you really do here? And then security's capacity in the business, rather than us getting a bigger seat at the business table, we get a smaller and smaller and smaller sliver of say. So it's actually counterproductive for what we're doing, right? So this enlightened methodology that I'm up here and many of my counterparts and colleagues are trying to preach is application functional mapping with data, layered automation-infused testing, and concrete metrics and KPIs. This talk today basically focuses on the first one because that whole next piece of it is a whole nother talk, and that last concrete metrics and KPIs is a webcast that I'm doing, and all sorts of things. So we have this idea, so do what you already do, but only make what you do smarter, right? So it's not that I want you guys to go out and stop using automation or stop doing the kind of testing you're doing today, because obviously, we've already heard that web apps are not going to get any better. I think we know for a fact, as Maniko walks in the room, that security testing is going to be around for a very, very long time because web developers are going to continue to write web vulnerabilities. Okay? Are we any closer to writing more secure code than we were in 1998? 97, when RFP decided, wrote the CGI scanner initially? I would contend that the answer is absolutely no, right? We just have more apps, we have more vulnerabilities. Sure, we're still fixing, but the explosion in the number of them and the number of apps is creating a much bigger problem. So, our application functional mapping with data. How many of you have actually ever performed functional testing? Anybody do functional testing here? Brilliant, okay. So there's this concept that I've been trying to bring up to security folks, and it's this idea of defects versus vulnerabilities. It is a very important distinction, and here's where I really start to diverge from a lot of the security field recently anyway, is I spend a lot of time with QA teams, and I learned some things. And I asked a lot of questions, and I came back with some of this data that basically, compare and contrast, right? QA teams know the functions of the application. Now, unintentional consequences of an application aside, they know what they're testing for. They sort of, the premise of functional testing is, here are 50 things that the application is expected to do. Go test them, make sure that they actually work in the way they're supposed to do. In the security field, we're looking for functions that are unknown, right? We do anti-testing, essentially. We try to find things that are not intended to be in the application. We try to find things that are not supposed to be there. It's always interesting explaining to people that don't know anything about security what we test for, because you say, well, all the stuff that's not supposed to be in the app. And you go, like what? Well, like, you rattle off cross-site scripting and SQL ingestion, and they go, well, why don't they just not put that in there? Well, you solved the problem. Thank you for coming. In the QA cycle, in the QA groups, they look at applications and they actually understand the application. So if I present an app and I basically say, so what does this app, sit down with a QA tester, what does this app do? And they go, oh, well, this app actually is a shopping cart, or it's a modification to a shopping cart, or it's something, it does this. I do the same thing with a pen tester testing a web app. Oftentimes the answer is, it's a web app, I don't care. I'm just supposed to find web vulns in it. That's kind of a dangerous road to go on. On the QA side, they rely on functional spec to guide their testing. On the security side, for whatever reason, we're still clinging to crawler's experience and luck. Right? We crawl, and point a crawler to a site or an app, use our own experience to try to figure out, okay, I know something else is going to be there, I've seen it before, and maybe sometimes you get lucky and you accidentally find something interesting. The two most important things for me are at the bottom here: coverage known and coverage unknown. If I ask a functional tester, out of the 15 requirements, business requirements, how many did you cover during your functional test, they can unequivocally tell me, I've tested all 15. I dare somebody in security testing to tell me how many functions they've tested for. 1, we don't know the functions. 2, we don't know how many we've tested. Right? This is a problem. This is a problem for many reasons. 1, we don't know how much of the app we've actually tested. If you're a company that does pen testing for customers for a living, for your daily bread, and I'm Joe Customer and I say, here's an application, go find all the vulnerabilities in it for me, and you come back